Hey, everybody. So, excuse me. We are starting this week with another book. Um, this time it's not necessarily a book, it's a play. And it's familiar, right? The author is familiar. It's Jean Paul Sartre. So, the same person that we saw before who talked about existentialism. And the play that we're going to be looking at is called No Exit. In French, it's called Huis Clos. Translates to pretty much the same thing: closed doors, right? This idea of impassable, you know, an impassable barrier, right? You can't get out, you can't get in, right? And we're going to be looking at this particular play as an introduction to the combination of existentialism and absurdism as we are evaluating a piece. With existentialism, we recall that we looked at existence, responsibility, and the fact that we are alone able to determine our existences, our actions, that we alone are responsible for our existence and our actions. And then when we looked at absurdism, as strictly defined by Albert Camus, that we are looking at the comparison between what is expected and what is received, right? The world that we want to be in, that we want to provide certain things, and then the world that we actually get. Neither of which is necessarily ridiculous, but the comparison and the expectation versus the reality is going to be very important for us. We talked about this idea that in the myth of Sisyphus, we have a sort of serious look at the idea that when we are presented with these challenges, when we are presented with the desire we have to live a certain way, to have certain things happen in our lives, and then the reality that we get with certain disappointments, with certain issues that we end up having with the world, that Camus questions, right? What is then our will to live? Right? What is our will to struggle and survive against this? And he ultimately decides that this is a more important thing than, struggling and surviving is more important. And it makes us into absurd heroes. That we can be very much like Sisyphus, a sort of never ending series of struggles that basically life has become. But the work of continuing to work and struggle and overcome obstacles, right? Even if we know that ultimately there is no overcoming life in general, is an important part of who we are. It makes us into effective and heroic characters. So when we look at No Exit, we are looking at, right, the founder sort of modern existentialism, the person who puts it into words and really espouses the majority of the ideas, brings them into the atheistic, modern society. We're going to be looking at his work, but also through the lens of Camus, who we will, that we saw right at the very beginning of the class with the plague. So it feels like we've sort of switched positions. It's because that these two theories are very closely related, right? This idea of responsibility and struggle meets the idea that we have unrealistic and impossible expectations for what we want in our lives. And we may look at both of these and say, boy, that's depressing, right? That we're sort of stuck with these two theories being very depressed and very, very, unhappy. Sartre would remind you, right, that this is an optimistic group of theories, right? That your own responsibility means that you can make of life what you want it to be, right? That you never have to accept at face value anything that's given to you, right? You can always choose to fight and struggle, right? And that Camus says, yeah, life is going to be, a weird series of disappointments sometimes, but, right, we are here And so we may as well really make the best of it, right? We have the opportunity to do, what we can to overcome our own disappointments. And we have the ability to decide, right? Are we going to be overcome by these things, or are we going to overcome them, right? So, this little bitty, tiny introduction here, just to say, right, reminders of what is existentialism, what is absurdism, what play are we looking at? No Exit by Sartre. We're going to be looking at it in just this single week. There will be two things posted, right? I will be posting a video, assuming that I can still access it properly, but that is the play itself, on the stage, right? It's very, very accurate. Garcin and company, right, in the play are well represented in the text of the theater piece is really well preserved. But we'll also be looking, right, and you will want to make sure that you have that book, right, itself, that play, that through the bookstore, through Kindle, and that will be sort of what we'll be looking at in this next week. So in our next video, we'll start breaking down sort of what is in this play and how we can begin to understand what's going on.